You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme, paying farmers to adopt climate-friendly practices. The new proposals from the government rewarding rewilding and biodiversity. New research finds air pollution in urban areas around the world contributed to 1.8 million excess deaths in 2019. And the new plants discovered last year, from a ghost orchid to a tree named after a famous actor. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. And we start today with new plans from the government to pay farmers and landowners to adopt nature and climate-friendly practices. Agriculture is thought to be responsible for around 10% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. And now, in a post-Brexit change of policy, money will be available to fund large-scale, long-term projects that store carbon and boost nature. Now, these could be rewilding landscapes, creating new nature reserves, or improving biodiversity. But environmental groups have criticised a lack of detail in the proposals. Here's what the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, had to say earlier.
We can, I think, farm more sustainably, and that's why our policy is going to be putting in place powerful incentives to support sustainable farming, sensitive hedgerow management, good stewardship of soils, and a focus on soil health and biodiversity within our soils, allowing hedgerows to recover, recognising them as probably the single most important ecological building block in the farmed landscape. And then, of course, recognising as well that there will be some land use change. You cannot deliver the targets we have for new woodland creation at 10,000 hectares a year, and you cannot deliver our ambition to restore habitats to their natural state in around 300,000 hectares unless there is a degree of land use change.
Well, joining me now is Tom Bradshaw, Vice President of the National Farmers Union. Welcome to you, Tom Bradshaw. When the UK was part of the EU, farmers were given grants based on how much land they farmed. These plans are based on payments for farming environmentally. So do you welcome the changes?
The way that George Eustice spoke about it just then, I think that he spelled out a very attractive picture. The critical thing here is we want to be producing sustainable food alongside environmental delivery. British farmers are very proud of the standards we produce our food to, and we already believe we're delivering a lot for the environment. Of course, we can do more, but really now it's about the incentives that government put in place to make sure that we are able to deliver alongside sustainable food production.
And are the incentives adequate? Is there enough money to persuade farmers to move to more sustainable practices?
And this is the challenge we're seeing at the moment, that when the sustainable farming incentive was rolled out early in December, the initial payment rates really don't look that attractive. And particularly for those that have got to substantially change the way they farm, it really doesn't appear that they're going to attract a big enough uptake. We know the ambition for DEFRA is to have over 70% of the land farmed under the sustainable farming incentive. We would like to see it even higher than that, but I do believe the incentives will need to be bigger to make sure that we really are able to produce truly sustainable food alongside biodiversity recovery, carbon capture, and managing for clean water and clean air.
Various groups have come out today and said they'd like to see more detail. They're saying it's nearly 6 years since the referendum. They should know more about what's in store for them. Would you agree with that criticism?
We would agree with that. I think when you know what the destination looks like, it's very easy to start putting a plan in place as to how you're going to get there. And what we're seeing at the moment is that policy is being rolled out a little bit sort of drip, 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 and we don't know exactly what the end goal is. So we need to see the detail, we need to see all the building blocks, and then farmers across the country will be able to invest in the future and make sure they get to the destination that DEFRA are trying to take us to. So we absolutely critically need that detail so that we can start to plan for the long term.
And what about tenant farmers who farm a lot of the land, about a third of the land, I think, in the UK? Is it clear what these new schemes mean for them?
Now, our biggest fear at the moment is how does this work for food production, but also for the tenanted sector? And a third of the land in the country is farmed by tenants. It could be quite attractive, particularly when you look at the rewilding areas and the nature recovery for landlords to take land back in hand. And what is the role of the tenant farmer going to be? How will they be able to access the schemes? And to get that 70% uptake, it's going to be absolutely crucial that it works for the landowner, it works for the tenant, and critically, it needs to work for food production.
Tom Bradshaw, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
In today's other climate news, conservation charity Trillian has launched an online investment tool to improve forest restoration. Organisations can use the tool to find out if their tree planting initiatives will really reach climate goals. The projects are marked out of 27, with the scores indicating areas that should be considered, such as which tree species are planted and the involvement of local communities. And coral reef fisheries, which support communities all over the world, are more resilient to climate change than originally believed. A study led by Lancaster University reveals that despite bleaching events, the fish caught at the reefs can remain rich sources of micronutrients. This finding is critical as continued global warming means coral bleaching events are becoming more frequent and more severe, placing greater stress on vulnerable ecosystems. And a new species of tropical tree has been named after the actor and environmentalist Leonardo DiCaprio. Uvariopsis DiCaprio, a 13-foot-tall tree from the ylang-ylang family with large yellow-green flowers on its trunk, was discovered in the Ebo forest in Cameroon. Scientists at Kew chose to honour the actor after he campaigned to end logging rights in the West African country. Air pollution in urban areas across the globe contributed to 1.8 million excess deaths in 2019, according to new research. Two studies by scientists in the United States looked at the effects of nitrogen dioxide and fine particulate pollution. Now, that's known as PM2.5, meaning particulate matter smaller than 2.5 millionths of a metre. Now, in 2019, these particulate matter levels in cities globally were 35 micrograms per cubic metre, meaning that air pollution levels were 7 times higher than guidelines set out by the World Health Organization. The second study looked at nitrogen dioxide gas, also known as NO2. Now, that's an air pollutant mainly emitted by vehicles, industrial manufacturing and agriculture. It revealed that in 2019, there were more than 1.8 million asthma cases in children associated with NO2 levels. And in urban areas, nitrogen dioxide was responsible for 16% of all new child asthma cases. Sky's Aisha Zahid has this report.
Ella was only 9 years old when she died following a severe asthma attack. In the last few years of her life, she'd been admitted to hospital 27 times and suffered multiple seizures. In a landmark ruling in 2020, a coroner said excessive air pollution contributed to her death.
We will never know, really, when Ella's problems really started. The only thing I can say to you was 3 months before her 7th birthday, that's when we first noticed it. She was born right next to the South Circular, and obviously that's where her final breath was taken. So for all of Ella's life, she was breathing illegal air.
Air pollution led to 1.8 million excess deaths in cities across the globe in 2019, according to new research. In the same year, nearly 2 million asthma cases among children worldwide were attributed to nitrogen dioxide pollution. And modelling suggests 2.5 billion people are living in urban areas with high levels of air pollution. Experts say the effects of this could be catastrophic.
The reason those air pollution has such a huge impact on our health is that it really attacks almost every organ of our body. It comes in deep into our lungs, in some cases for the very fine particles and ultrafine particles, into the bloodstream, and it affects pretty much anything from our brain, and it affects particularly how children's cognitive development and lung development is impaired. So we need to push that tendency so that we really transform our cities so that it's so easy to walk, bike, take public transportation everywhere. We have to do it.
While the UK has seen reductions in air pollution over the last decade, the government acknowledges there's still more to do. It says it's committed to setting stretching and ambitious targets. Ella's mum, Rosamond, is campaigning for change to come sooner rather than later. She hopes saving lives will be her daughter's legacy. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
Deforestation in parts of West Africa could be leading to more severe rainstorms and floods in the region, according to new research. The study found that forests help to regulate the local climate, so the bigger the deforested area, the worse the storms. And extreme weather events are expected to become more common as global warming ticks up. Well, meteorologist Professor Chris Taylor from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology led the research and joins me now. Professor Taylor, what did you discover then about the link between deforestation and extreme weather in West Africa?
So what we found was that deforestation, as you said, is making storms become more frequent. And that effect in West Africa, that effect is particularly strong along the coastline. We were looking in countries such as Sierra Leone and Ivory Coast. And the fact that these changes are happening on the coastline is important because that's where most people live. So there's cities like Freetown in Sierra Leone, which are growing at a phenomenal rate. And they're especially vulnerable to flash flooding from storms. In 2017, there was a terrible event where a flash flood triggered mudslides and over 1,000 people died.
And are you seeing this pattern, whatever the terrain?
Yeah, pretty much. The key thing is the proximity of the ocean to the area that's deforested. So the ocean's playing a key effect. So we see it in mountainous areas and flatter areas.
So deforestation is having an effect on the storms. What about when that's tied into the impact of climate change?
Well, climate change is increasing temperatures, and deforestation increases temperatures also at a very local scale. So that warming caused by the deforestation is warming the land relative to the ocean, and that draws in more moisture from the ocean. And every day when there's a sea breeze, when that moisture is drawn in, it triggers thunderstorms. And that's what's happening here. So that areas which have been deforested, we saw the frequency of storms was doubled over the last 30 years compared to 30 or 40% in areas where there was no deforestation over that period.
And can you extrapolate that and look into the future? What's likely to happen?
For sure. So continuing deforestation in this region will continue to exacerbate that effect. If policies are put in place for reforestation, then we might expect to see a reversal of that and a return to the more natural balance of heating and moistening of the atmosphere that the forests provide.
Professor Chris Taylor, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, do stay tuned. Coming up here on the Daily Climate Show, I'll be joined by specialist in global environmental politics at Cardiff University, Jen Allen, and the director of anti-poverty charity War on Want, Asad Rehman. And we'll be discussing why governments aren't doing more to tackle deadly air pollution and whether planting trees really is the answer to tackling climate change. Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. And we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with specialist in global environmental politics at Cardiff University, Jen Allen, and the director of anti-poverty charity War on Want, Asad Rehman. So very good evening to both of you. Nice to see you both. Well, first of all, the numbers are stark. Nearly 2 million excess deaths from air pollution in 2019, according to a study in The Lancet. Well, despite all our talk on the climate crisis, are we overlooking an issue which poses a critical risk to millions all over the world? Jen, to you, first of all, these really are shocking figures, aren't they? I mean, is the dangers around pollution getting the levels of attention that you think it should?
It really isn't. Air pollution is often sort of the poor cousin or the second sister, depending on what family member you want to choose, to climate change. There's a lot of talk about climate change, the need for cities to address climate change, but tackling air pollution saves lives and it helps with our healthcare systems. And in tackling air pollution, that also helps address climate change. There's examples around the world where if the source of air pollution is, say, a coal plant, shutting down that coal plant also helps the climate.
Assad, there is a big crossover here, isn't there? The coal example Jen brings in there, also moving transportation to electric vehicles as well will help reduce pollution as well. But is climate change squeezing the problems around pollution out of the conversation, do you think?
I think it's actually a bigger question of what do we mean when we talk about climate change? I think for too long, people have thought climate was really something about, parts per million or just temperature rises, where we really should be talking about climate is air pollution. It's about public transport. It's about our health. It's about the quality of life. So I think we need to have a very, very different conversation about climate that includes air pollution, not only because, of course, it's material impact on people's lives and on reducing emissions, but also because it's really critical in ways that engages people in understanding the importance of tackling the climate crisis, but also the benefits that we have if we do that. That good quality air is vital for our health, for our quality of life, and of course, for tackling the climate crisis.
Well, yeah, and that makes it sound like quite a simple sell, doesn't it, Jen? So who should be stepping up here and doing something about it? Is this about national governments making sure they've got the right policies in place, or is this about initiatives born out of cities?
It's about cities and national governments working together. Cities can't do it alone. They have enormous challenges as it is. They need the support around investing in public transit, working to create walkable, livable, healthier cities. And those big polluting industries, that's a national government responsibility. So there has to be a partnership and a dialogue here. It can't be sort of a match back and forth about everyone not taking responsibility for it.
And there are some successful projects underway, aren't there, Assad, around the world now? There are things that work.
There are plenty of solutions. It's never been a lack of solutions. Look, we've seen from Barcelona to Bogota to Paris, cities being redesigned to put the primacy of people and their health away from transport policies largely been designed around cars. And that's been great. We've seen healthier, more investment in cycling, walking, and public transport, including free public, initiatives that have made public transport free to be able to engage people. But what has always been lacking is the political will. So while cities may want to do this, until national governments are setting ambitious targets, putting plans in place, and more importantly, providing the resources so that cities can take these sort of actions, what we're going to see is lots of conversations and lots of promises to act, but very, very little of these concrete policies. It's never been that we don't know what needs to be done. What's been lacking is the political will from governments to do it.
And Jen, briefly, is part of the problem the fact that the most polluted areas tend to be the poorer areas, and those are people who feel they don't have such a voice?
Equity is such a big issue here. There's evidence around the world that polluting industries tend to be cited in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods in the US, in First Nations territories in Canada. And so we can't just say air pollution affects everyone the same. Even though we all breathe the same air, it affects different groups disproportionately. And giving those groups voice and bringing them into the conversation is going to be fundamental to addressing air pollution and the climate crisis.
OK, let's move on to our second topic now, shall we? Because we heard earlier that the organisation Trillian is launching a tool which helps organisations work out whether their plan to plant trees is doing enough to reach their climate goals. It's an effort to make sure that offsetting is about more than simply planting trees. It's also about reforestation and the people doing it. So, Jen, as a general rule, can we say that tree planting schemes are unequivocally a good thing?
Oh, gosh, they are not a silver bullet in any way. Problem number one is trees burn. And when that happens, when we have forest fires, all of the carbon that they've soaked up for us then is re-released into the atmosphere. So tree planting's good. I'm not going to ever discourage anyone from planting a tree, but we can't use it as a Band-Aid that we put over the climate crisis to sort of try to absolve us of our sins as we emit more and more into the atmosphere.
Assad, what do you think? I mean, this scheme does sound like it's very good on the face of it, but generally, do you agree with Jen that it's like a Band-Aid? It gives people an easy way out when they say, it's fine, I might do this polluting thing, but I'll plant some trees?
Absolutely, I agree with Jen. I mean, what we see increasingly is this: we'll carry on polluting, and then we'll put these other policies in place, and somehow they'll all equalise out. Look, the reality is, you know, the carbon budget we've got to keep temperatures below 1.5 is about 10 years. There is absolutely no room for any offsets. You know, what we really need is actual real zero targets. That means real emissions reductions, not this idea you can carry on like a lot of the big dirty energy companies are all saying. We'll carry on digging for more oil and gas and coal as long as we can plant some trees somewhere else. As Jen said, look, you know, trees burn, but more importantly, it also misses the real problem of deforestation. And deforestation, as the UN has said, the overwhelming majority of trees that are being cut down is because of our agricultural system, industrial agriculture, it's because of our mining, it's because of roads and dams. And until you deal with those, and the best solution actually to deal with those is actually land rights for Indigenous communities. If we did that, we'd be doing much better in terms of protecting what we've got. And that's the real important thing. We have to protect the forests that we have. These initiatives to plant more trees, I'm not going to, as Jen said, I'm not going to say that they aren't, you know, useful, but they are not the policy solution.
But Jen, there are some industries that are struggling to make the technological breakthroughs to make them less likely to pollute and increase climate change. So given that we've got those, are there other solutions we can look at, other carbon sinks? We could focus on peatlands or mangroves or soil restoration.
There are some sectors that are called the hard to abate sectors. They're ones where we don't quite have the tech yet. It doesn't mean that there's nothing that we can do. I mean, there was an example a few months ago about greener steel. So the steel industry, which is one of those hard to abate sectors, also has potential options in-house to reduce emissions in the first place. Yeah, we can invest in peatlands and mangroves. There's technologies maybe, but at the end of the day, there's only so much that Mother Nature can help us here. Because at the same time that we're asking Mother Nature to help us absorb all of this carbon dioxide, we're also hurting the planet and weakening its ability to do that.
Okay.
So we really need to sort of reduce emissions first.
Sorry to cut you off, Jen. We are out of time. But Jen Ellen, Asad Roman, always good to talk to you both. Thanks so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Well, that's everything from the Daily Climate Show for today. Tomorrow, I'll be joined by climate activist Laura Young and Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield, Michael Jacobs. Thanks very much for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. See you then.